Imagine, the year is 1900. In the middle of the Aegean Sea, a small group of sponge divers changes course to escape a violent storm. No one knows they are heading toward a discovery that will change the course of history. One of the divers pulls on his heavy lead helmet. A thick air hose hangs from his shoulder. He takes a deep breath and begins to descend into the darkness of the sea. 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. Sunlight slowly disappears. Everything is silent. The only sound is his breathing echoing inside the metal helmet. Then he reaches the bottom of the sea. But what he sees is not rocks or coral. Human bodies are everywhere. At least, that is how it appears at first glance. Arms, heads, faces. Scattered across the seabed, the diver panics. When he surfaces, he says in a trembling voice, "The bottom of the sea is full of corpses." A few hours later, the truth emerges. They are not human. They are bronze and marble statues that have lain underwater for hundreds of years. A great ancient shipwreck has been discovered. That day, everyone's attention is drawn to the statues. Gold, marble, bronze artifacts. All of them are carefully brought to the surface, one by one. But during the recovery work, a small metal fragment that no one pays attention to is also placed into the crates with the other finds. It is rusted, broken, covered in marine life. At first glance, it looks no different from ordinary scrap. Perhaps the remains of an old clock mechanism. Perhaps a broken piece of the ship. Perhaps nothing more than a worthless lump of metal. No one bothers to look at it twice. Months pass. The finds are taken to the museum. One day, one of the researchers picks up one of the rusty metal fragments, and in that moment, he notices something unexpected. Through the layer of rust, small regular teeth become visible. A gear, then another gear, and several more. These are not shapes that nature could have formed. Someone had deliberately created this mechanism. But the real problem was only beginning, because gear systems of this complexity were not supposed to appear until roughly 1,000 years later. At least, that is what everyone believed. So then, what was such an advanced mechanism doing inside a ship that sank nearly 2,000 years ago? Could it really have been made in antiquity? Or did the history books contain one of the greatest misconceptions about humanity's technological past? This rusty piece of metal that we now call the Antikythera Mechanism may not be merely an archaeological artifact. It may be silent proof of how incomplete our knowledge of our own past really is. And this discovery will lead us not toward answers, but toward far greater questions. Because what we are about to see is not just an old machine, it may be history's first analog computer. The Antikythera wreck was no ordinary ship. The statues, glassware, coins, ceramics, and luxury objects recovered from the seabed showed that the vessel was carrying valuable cargo between the rich centers of the ancient world. It was probably heading toward Rome, perhaps for a powerful commander's triumph, perhaps on behalf of a wealthy collector, perhaps carrying works destined to decorate the villa of an elite Roman. But the ship never reached its destination. Near the island of Antikythera, it lost control in violent winds and waves. Its wooden hull broke apart, its cargo scattered across the seabed, and the secret the ship was carrying remained in the darkness for nearly 2,000 years. The most valuable objects recovered from the wreck were cleaned and prepared for display relatively quickly. But the rusted metal fragments waited for a long time in a museum storeroom, because no one could understand what they contained, until the pieces began to dry. The metal that had been extracted from seawater cracked as it came into contact with air. Some fragments separated from one another, and within those broken surfaces, details that had never been seen before began to emerge. Bronze gears, rings, fine markings, and tiny inscriptions engraved on the surfaces. Researchers now understood that this was no ordinary navigational instrument, but they still could not say what it actually was, because what they held was not a complete machine. It was crushed, fragmented, irregular clusters of metal fused together by rust. Imagine finding only a few burned pages of a book. The pages are out of order, some words are erased, half the sentences are missing, and you are asked to figure out what the entire book was about. That was exactly the problem faced by the researchers trying to understand the Antikythera mechanism. Every small gear told part of the machine's story, but the complete system remained invisible. The first researchers considered different possibilities. Could it have been a clock, a calendar, or an advanced instrument used by sailors for navigation? No explanation could make all the pieces fit. Then the inscriptions on the surfaces began to be examined. Some were almost completely worn away. Others could only be seen under light coming from certain angles. Among the readable words were sun, moon, planets, months, and expressions related to astronomical cycles. It was at this point that the true purpose of the mechanism began to emerge. This machine did not merely tell time, it tracked the sky. It could calculate the positions of the sun and the moon, display the phases of the moon, follow calendar cycles, and probably predict future eclipses. When you turned a handle, dozens of gears inside moved at the same time, each rotating at different speeds, and transferred the movements of the heavens onto the surface of a small box. Imagine, you no longer need to look up to see how the sky will change over the years. You simply set the mechanism to a particular date, and the machine shows you what will appear in the sky on that day. This was not a simple calendar. This was a device that turned mathematics into metal, but the mystery was growing even larger, because building such a complex machine required far more than astronomical knowledge alone. The sizes of the gears had to be calculated. Every tooth had to be cut at the correct intervals, and every part had to work in perfect harmony within the same system. A single small error could ruin the entire calculation. So how did the craftsmen of antiquity manage to produce such a precise machine? And more importantly, if they possessed the knowledge to do so, why have no other similar machines survived? Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism was not unique. Perhaps it was simply the only example that managed to reach us. But to understand that, it was necessary to look beneath the rusted surface, because the true complexity hidden inside the mechanism lay far deeper than the human eye could see. So how did researchers finally understand what these rusted metal fragments actually did? Because there was no working machine, only bronze pieces fused together, broken gears, and inscriptions that were almost impossible to read. For many years, the Antikythera mechanism remained nothing more than an interesting archaeological curiosity. But as technology advanced, the machine gradually began to reveal its secrets. In the early 2000s, researchers used high-resolution three-dimensional X-ray scanning to examine the mechanism without dismantling it. For the first time, the gears hidden beneath the rust could be seen in complete detail. And the picture that emerged was nothing like anyone had expected. 1, 2, 10, 20. As the research progressed, dozens of bronze gears were identified. Some were only a few centimeters in size, yet each one connected perfectly to the next, like a mechanical chain of dominoes. When one gear turned, the entire system behind it was set in motion. Moreover, not all the gears turned at the same speed. Some moved very slowly, others more quickly, each designed with precise ratios to represent different movements in the sky. This was what truly astonished the researchers. This was not merely a box full of gears. This was a calculating machine, and it did not calculate with numbers written on stone or bronze, but with moving mechanical parts. On the front of the machine were indicators showing the positions of the sun and the moon. On the back were interlocking circular dials. These dials did not merely show the days of the calendar, they could also calculate approaching eclipses. Imagine, you want to see 2 years into the future. All you have to do is turn a small handle. The gears begin to turn, the indicators slowly advance, and the machine shows you whether there will be a solar eclipse on that date, a lunar eclipse, or whether the sky will remain completely clear. To a person living 2,000 years ago, This would have seemed almost like magic. But there was no magic. There was only extraordinary mathematics. The number of teeth on each gear had been calculated according to specific astronomical cycles. A single incorrectly cut tooth could throw the entire system into error, so the people who built this machine did not merely know how to work metal, they had also observed the sky with remarkable accuracy. And perhaps the most astonishing detail was the strong evidence that the machine may have been designed to show not only the sun and the moon, but also the movements of the planets known in antiquity. If that is true, what we have is not a simple astronomical instrument, but a mechanical model of the universe that could fit in the palm of a hand. Yet this discovery brought a new problem with it, because a civilization capable of designing such an advanced mechanism should have left behind hundreds of similar examples. Yet today, no other ancient machine has been found that even approaches the level of the Antikythera mechanism. It is as if someone developed a technology far ahead of its time, and then that knowledge suddenly vanished from history. That is why many scientists are still pursuing the same question. Was the Antikythera mechanism truly unique? Or have we simply found the only example that survived to the present day? What we have seen so far was already astonishing. A 2,000-year-old shipwreck, rusted bronze fragments, and a mechanical device capable of calculating the sky. But more interesting than all of this was not the machine itself, it was the level of knowledge of the people who made it. Because to produce the Antikythera mechanism, being a skilled metalworker was not enough. One had to understand the sky, one had to know mathematics, one had to calculate gear ratios, and one had to manufacture all of it with a precision where even a millimeter mattered. The arrangement you see when you open a modern watch is based on the same principle. Each gear turns the next at a precise ratio. A single error destroys the entire system. The same was true of the Antikythera mechanism. That is why many researchers began to ask this question. Could such an advanced machine really have appeared in isolation? Or was it simply the last surviving example of a long technological tradition? This is where the debate begins. Some historians believe that many similar mechanisms were produced in the ancient Greek world, mechanisms that are now lost, perhaps in wealthy observatories, perhaps in schools of science, perhaps only in the hands of elite scholars. Devices like this were used, but bronze was a valuable metal. Over the centuries, the majority of ancient objects were melted down and reused. If other mechanisms truly existed, perhaps none of them reached us. This theory is considered one of the most plausible explanations by many researchers today. But not everyone agrees. Some believe the Antikythera mechanism was an extraordinary exception. Perhaps a single genius, perhaps a small team, created a device far ahead of its time. Then, for some reason, that knowledge could not be continued. Wars, economic collapse, the fall of empires, the destruction of libraries, and the death of the craftsman. Sometimes humanity does not only lose cities, it loses knowledge as well. History is full of such examples, and the Antikythera mechanism may be the silent witness of just such a loss. Over the years, alongside the scientific explanations, far more extraordinary theories also appeared. Some claimed the machine was inspired by extraterrestrial technology. Others said it was the work of lost civilizations like Atlantis. Still others suggested that humanity once possessed a far more advanced civilization than we have imagined. All of these theories shared one thing in common. They were fascinating. But to this day, no reliable archaeological evidence has been found to support these claims. What science can say today is far simpler. The Antikythera mechanism was an extraordinary product of human intelligence, but we still do not fully understand the body of knowledge that made it possible. And perhaps the real mystery was never the machine itself. The real mystery was how the people who possessed this knowledge could disappear from history so silently. Because today we have only one machine, but perhaps we are looking at the last remaining fragment of an entire world of knowledge. And if that is true, then the final question waiting for us is not what the machine did, but what else humanity has forgotten. At the beginning of this film, we started with a rusty metal fragment recovered from the bottom of the sea. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary piece of wreckage that no one cared about. But beneath that layer of rust lay an extraordinary mechanism that forces us to question what we know about human history. Nearly 2,000 years ago, someone designed a machine capable of calculating the sky, tracking astronomical cycles, and operating dozens of bronze gears in perfect harmony. Today we call it the Antikythera Mechanism. For about 15 minutes, we have been following a single question. How was this machine made? Who designed it? And why do we encounter no similar examples in history? Perhaps we will never find definitive answers to any of these questions. But perhaps the real answer does not lie where we are looking. Because history teaches us something interesting. Sometimes people do not only lose their cities, they do not only lose their empires. Sometimes they lose their knowledge as well. A technique known only to a craftsman can disappear with him. The calculations of a mathematician can be forgotten forever if they are never written down. The knowledge accumulated by a civilization over hundreds of years can be erased from history by a single war. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the Antikythera Mechanism is not how it worked. The real mystery is why the world of knowledge that made it possible is no longer in our hands, because we have only one machine. But perhaps there was once far more, and today we are looking only at the last silent witness that remains. Human history is sometimes shaped less by what we discover than by what we have lost. And perhaps the Antikythera Mechanism is reminding us of this. The past was far more complex than we imagined. Knowledge was far more fragile than we believed, and history still keeps many secrets it has not yet told us. If this story has left you with a single question, what other knowledge has humanity lost? I strongly recommend watching the documentary we published on the Library of Alexandria, because one of the greatest losses of knowledge in human history, and why it is still debated today, is explored in far greater detail in that film. Perhaps, in order to truly understand the Antikythera Mechanism, we first need to understand what humanity has lost, because sometimes the greatest mystery is not what we have found, it is what we have lost forever.